Ambassador Velkarath of the hegemony of 12 spheres had studied the humans for 17 standard cycles before making his recommendation to the Grand Council. In that time, he had watched them terraform 3 worlds, establish peaceful trade relations with 11 species, and contribute more scientific discoveries to the galactic database than any civilization in their developmental stage should have been capable of producing.
He had watched them build hospitals on plague worlds, negotiate ceasefires between ancient enemies, and share their agricultural technologies freely with starving populations across the Perseus Arm. He had attended their art exhibitions, listened to their music, and marveled at the way they seemed to genuinely care about species they had only just encountered.
In all that time, he had never once seen them raise a weapon in anger. "They are soft," he told the Grand Council, his 3 eyes blinking in sequence as he delivered his assessment. "Their military forces are ceremonial at best. They maintain small defensive fleets, primarily for asteroid deflection and piracy deterrence. Their ground forces are used almost exclusively for disaster relief and peacekeeping missions. They have not fought a significant war among themselves in over 300 of their years."
High Counselor Morthax leaned forward, his chitinous mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "And you believe they would not resist annexation?"
"I believe they could not resist annexation," Velkarath corrected. "Their population is spread across 17 worlds and 43 orbital habitats. Their economy is deeply integrated with ours. They depend on us for rare minerals and helium-3. A simple blockade would bring them to their knees within months. They would negotiate. It is what they do."
"And their history?" asked Counselor Shinva, the eldest of the council. "My researchers tell me they were once a violent species."
Velkarath waved a dismissive tendril. "Ancient history. They warred among themselves constantly in their primitive past, yes, but they evolved beyond it. 3 centuries of peace have dulled whatever martial instincts they once possessed. Their children are not taught warfare. Their media glorifies cooperation and understanding. They have become exactly what we always hoped our subject species would become: compliant, productive, and utterly dependent on the stability we provide." The council deliberated for 9 days. In the end, they voted 11-1 in favor of annexation. The lone dissenting vote came from Counselor Thalmira, the youngest member of the council, and the only one who had actually set foot on Earth. "You are making a mistake," she said quietly, as the vote was recorded. "I have walked among them. I have seen what lies beneath their peaceful facade."
"And what is that?" Morthax asked, amused.
"Memory," she said. "They remember everything. Every war, every battle, every atrocity, every victory. They built monuments to it. They teach it in their schools. They write stories about it, make entertainments about it, study it with the same rigor they apply to physics and mathematics."
"Remembering war is not the same as being capable of waging it," Velkarath said. Thalmira shook her head slowly. "You don't understand. They don't remember war as a tragedy to be avoided. They remember it as a skill to be preserved. They called it never again, but what they meant was, we will be ready if we must do this again."
Her warning was noted and dismissed.
3 months later, the hegemony of 12 spheres sent its annexation fleet to Earth. Admiral Chen Wei-Lin received the news of the approaching fleet while standing in the Hall of Remembrance in Beijing. The ancient building had been preserved for over 5 centuries, its walls lined with the names of the dead from the Third World War, the last great conflict humanity had fought before its unification.
Her aide found her standing before a particular section of the wall, her fingers tracing names that had been old when her great-grandmother was young.
"Admiral, the hegemony fleet has crossed the Mars orbit. 300 ships. They're making no attempt to negotiate."
Chen didn't turn around. "What do they want?" "Complete annexation. They've sent terms. We would become a protectorate, subject to hegemony law. Conscription of our labor force. Extraction rights to all colonial resources. Tribute payments."
"Slavery," Chen said quietly.
They're offering us slavery with extra steps.
The civilian government is in emergency session. They want to know our options.
Chen finally turned. At 63 years old, she still moved with the fluid grace of the fighter pilot she had once been. Her hair was white now, her face lined with age, but her eyes were the same cold black they had always been.
Tell President Okonkwo that I am implementing Contingency Omega.
Her aide's face went pale. Admiral, that protocol hasn't been used since... Since never. It's never been used, that's the point. Chen started walking toward the exit. It was designed for exactly this moment, when someone finally decided to test whether humanity had truly forgotten how to fight.
The Council will want assurances that we're seeking a diplomatic solution.
Chen paused at the door. We are seeking a diplomatic solution. We're going to show them exactly why they should have negotiated with us in the first place.
Deep beneath the Cheyenne Mountain Complex in North America, lights that had been dark for 300 years began to flicker on.
The facility had been maintained continuously since the 21st century, upgraded and expanded with each generation of technology, its existence known to fewer than 1,000 people on Earth at any given time. It was called the Archive, and it contained humanity's most carefully guarded secret. Major General James Okafor, the Archive's commander, had trained his entire life for this moment. So had his predecessors, and their predecessors before them. For 3 centuries, the caretakers of the Archive had waited, hoping they would never be needed, knowing they eventually would be.
Initiate full activation, he ordered. All divisions. The facility came alive around him. Servers that had been dormant began processing data. Manufacturing systems that had been kept in perfect readiness began to hum. Training simulations that had been running continuously for generations suddenly connected to real-world systems for the first time.
Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving acknowledgement from archive stations worldwide. Antarctica, Marianas, Luna, Titan, all coming online.
What about the seed vaults?
Opening now. All genetic material is viable. Biofabrication facilities are beginning production.
Okafor nodded. The seed vaults didn't contain plants. They contained the genetic blueprints for weapons, biological, chemical, and technological, that humanity had promised itself it would never use again. Weapons that made nuclear bombs look like firecrackers. Weapons that the galaxy had never seen, and God willing, never would. But the vaults also contained something else, something more important.
They contained humanity's memory of how to use them. The humans called it the doctrine of total preservation. After the Third World War had killed 4 billion people and rendered 1/3 of Earth's surface uninhabitable, the survivors had gathered to ensure that such a catastrophe would never happen again. But they had disagreed on how to achieve this goal. Some argued for complete disarmament. Destroy every weapon, delete every schematic, burn every military text. Make war impossible by making it forgotten. Others argued differently. The knowledge cannot be destroyed, said General Marcus Stone, addressing the Tokyo Convention in 2156. If we forget how to wage war, we will simply learn again when the need arises. But we will learn badly, making mistakes that cost millions of lives. Worse, others will remember what we have forgotten. They will use our amnesia against us. What do you propose? Asked the Chinese delegate. We preserve everything. Every weapon, every tactic, every strategy. We maintain them in perfect condition. We train specialists in their use, passing the knowledge from generation to generation. But we do this in secret, hidden from view, so that our public face, our true face, can be one of peace. You're talking about maintaining a secret army. I'm talking about maintaining a memory of what we are capable of when pushed to the brink, a memory that we pray we will never need to use. But if that day comes, if someone threatens our existence, we will be ready.
not with untrained conscripts and improvised weapons, but with the full weight of 10,000 years of human warfare distilled into perfect, terrible efficiency. The vote was contentious. It passed by a single margin. And so the archive was born. For 3 centuries, while humanity built its reputation as a peaceful, cooperative species, the archive grew. The best military minds of each generation were quietly recruited, trained, and given a sacred duty: preserve the art of war so that peace might endure.
They studied every battle ever fought, from Thermopylae to Stalingrad to the siege of Sao Paulo. They maintained ancient weapons and developed new ones. They ran simulations, war games, and training exercises. They analyzed potential enemies and developed strategies for every conceivable scenario. When humanity made first contact with the hegemony, the archive analyzed them within days. Within weeks, they had developed 17 different strategies for defeating them militarily. Within months, those strategies had been refined, tested, and stored away, ready for instant implementation.
The archivists hoped they would never be needed, but they were ready.
The hegemony fleet entered Earth's orbit, expecting surrender. What they received was a message.
Admiral Chen's face appeared on every view screen in the invasion fleet. She was standing on the bridge of a ship they had never seen before, a vessel that had seemingly appeared from nowhere, its design unlike anything in the galactic database.
This is Admiral Chen Wei-Lin of the Earth Defense Force. You have violated sovereign human space with hostile intent. You have 30 standard minutes to reverse course and exit our system. Failure to comply will be interpreted as an act of war and responded to accordingly. Fleet Commander Veshka laughed when he received the message. 1 ship? They send 1 ship against 300?
Commander, his sensor officer said, his voice uncertain, I'm detecting anomalies throughout the system. Energy signatures we don't recognize.
Probably civilian ships powering up to flee. Ignore them. Veshka leaned back in his command chair. Signal the human. Tell her that her deadline is meaningless. We will accept nothing less than complete surrender. Commander, the anomalies are multiplying. I'm now counting... This can't be right. What? I'm counting over 12,000 individual signatures, and they're not civilian ships. Their power outputs are. They're military vessels, Commander. Thousands of them. Veshka sat up. That's impossible. Our intelligence indicated they had fewer than 100 combat-capable vessels. I don't know what to tell you, sir. They're appearing all over the system. Some seem to be launching from concealed positions on planetary bodies. Others are emerging from what appear to be artificial structures disguised as asteroids. And there are more coming in from outside the system, ships that must have been stationed beyond our detection range. On the view screen, Admiral Chen was still waiting. Behind her, Veshka could now see other human officers moving with calm efficiency. They didn't look surprised. They didn't look afraid. They looked like they had been waiting for this moment their entire lives. Commander, the sensor officer said quietly, we're also detecting weapon signatures on Earth's surface. Orbital defense platforms we didn't know existed. Missile silos, energy weapons. The entire planet is armed. That's impossible. We've been monitoring Earth for decades. We would have seen construction on that scale. Sir, I don't think this was constructed recently. These installations look old. Very old. They've been there the entire time. They were just hidden. Veshka stared at the view screen. For the first time, he felt something he hadn't felt in decades of military command. Fear. Admiral Chen waited patiently as the 30-minute deadline expired. The hegemony fleet had not moved. They don't believe us, her tactical officer observed. Of course they don't. They've spent years convincing themselves that we're harmless. They need a demonstration. Chen turned to her weapons officer. Target the 5th ship in their formation, the supply vessel. Ma'am, that's a non-combat target.
Exactly. We're going to show them we're serious, not start a massacre. Yet, she paused. Use the kinetic system.
Low power. I want that ship disabled, not destroyed.
The kinetic system was humanity's answer to the energy weapons favored by most galactic species. Where others relied on directed energy beams that could be deflected by shields, humans had perfected the art of throwing things very, very fast. The projectile that struck the hegemony's supply vessel massed only a few kilograms. It was accelerated to a fraction of light speed by a magnetic launch system that the Archive had been refining for 2 centuries. It struck the target in less than a second, too fast to be tracked by conventional sensors.
The supply vessel's shields never activated. They weren't designed to stop something moving that fast. The projectile punched through the hull like it wasn't there, emerging from the other side, trailing atmosphere and debris.
Target disabled, the weapons officer reported. Casualties appear to be minimal. The ship is losing atmosphere, but their crew is evacuating to sealed compartments.
On the view screen, the hegemony fleet was in chaos. Veshka's face appeared, his composure finally cracked. What did you just do? We detected no weapons fire, no energy signature.
That's because we didn't use energy weapons, Chen said. We used physics. Specifically, we used the principle that a small object moving very fast carries a great deal of kinetic energy. It's simple, really. Your species moved past kinetic weapons thousands of years ago. You assumed everyone did. You assumed wrong.
You attacked a non-combat vessel. I disabled a non-combat vessel. There's a difference. If I had wanted to destroy your entire fleet, I would have done so already. Chen leaned forward slightly. Let me be clear, Fleet Commander. We have weapons you cannot detect, cannot block, and cannot survive. We have strategies and tactics that your species has never encountered. We have been preparing for this moment for 300 years. You assumed that because we chose peace, we had forgotten war. You were wrong.
She paused, letting that sink in. You now have a choice. You can reverse course, leave our system, and we can all pretend this never happened. Or you can continue your attack, and we will demonstrate exactly why humans were once the most dangerous species on our planet. We achieved peace, not because we forgot how to fight, but because we chose not to. We can make a different choice at any time.
You're bluffing, Veshka said, but his voice wavered.
Am I? Let me show you something. Chen gestured to her tactical officer, who changed the view screen display.
The image that appeared was Earth's orbital space, but instead of the peaceful traffic of civilian vessels and trading stations, the display now showed the full extent of humanity's hidden arsenal. Thousands of ships, ranging from small attack craft to massive carriers that dwarfed anything in the hegemony fleet. Weapons platforms bristling with launch tubes and energy arrays. Swarms of autonomous drones waiting for activation commands. This is what we maintained in secret while telling you we had no military. This is what every government on Earth has been quietly funding for 3 centuries. This is what we built because we knew someday someone would assume our peace meant weakness.
She let the image linger for a long moment. And this, she said, as the display changed again, is what we can do with it. The tactical display now showed a simulation. In it, the hegemony fleet was destroyed in less than 90 seconds. The simulation ran through multiple scenarios, different tactics, different formations, different responses. In every single one, the result was the same.
Total annihilation.
We ran this simulation thousands of times, Chen said. We started developing it the day we first made contact with your species. We've been refining it ever since. We have strategies specifically designed to counter every ship class in your fleet, every tactical doctrine your species uses, every weapon system you've ever deployed. We know you better than you know yourselves.
That's not possible.
It's not only possible, it's standard practice. Did you really think we built all those cultural exchange programs, all those trade missions, all those academic partnerships just for friendship?
We were studying you, learning your weaknesses, preparing for the day you might become our enemy. Chen's expression hardened. We didn't survive 100,000 years on a death world by being naive, Fleet Commander. We survived by assuming that anything we couldn't eat might try to eat us.
Part 6. The History Lesson. Fleet Commander Veshka demanded time to consult with his superiors. Chen granted him 1 hour.
While they waited, she found herself walking through the corridors of her flagship, the UES Memorial. The ship's name was no accident. Its walls were lined with displays showing key moments in human military history, reminders of what they were fighting to never return to, and what they would embrace again if they had to.
She stopped before a display showing the mushroom cloud over Hiroshima.
"I never understood why you kept that one," said a voice behind her. She turned to find Captain Sarah Okonjo, her tactical officer, standing at a respectful distance. "It's a reminder of what we're capable of when pushed to extremes," Chen said. "Also a reminder of why we chose to pursue peace."
Do you think they'll back down?
"I don't know, but if they don't," Chen gestured at the display. This was the culmination of less than 50 years of industrial warfare. Imagine what we could do with 300 years of preparation. "The archive has things that make this look like a firecracker." "Yes, things I pray we never have to use." Chen turned away from the display. "Do you know why I was chosen for this command, Sarah?" "Because you're the best tactical mind in the fleet." "Because my grandmother survived the siege of Sao Paulo. She was 6 years old when the city fell. She spent 3 weeks in the ruins, eating rats and hiding from death squads. She never let me forget what war really means." Chen's voice grew distant. She used to wake up screaming. Even 80 years later, she still had nightmares. When I was a child, I asked her why she always wanted me to learn about war when it clearly caused her so much pain. "What did she say?" "She said that forgetting was the one thing she could never allow. That the moment we forgot what war was like, we would find ourselves in another one. That our only protection against our own demons was to remember them clearly." Chen paused. "That's why we built the archive. Not to preserve weapons, but to preserve memory. The memory of what war really is. Not glory, not adventure, but horror and waste and the destruction of everything precious."
And if the hegemony doesn't back down?
"Then we use those weapons to remind them why they should have negotiated. And then, when it's over, we add their names to our walls." Chen looked at the mushroom cloud one last time. "We remember our enemies too, especially the ones who gave us no choice." The hour expired. Veshka's face reappeared on the view screen. "The Grand Council has reviewed your demonstration," he said. His voice was strained, his earlier arrogance replaced by something approaching respect. "They find themselves reconsidering their position." "I'm pleased to hear that," Chen said neutrally. "However, they have concerns. They have invested considerable resources in this operation. Simply withdrawing would be politically difficult."
I understand. Politics often is.
They propose a compromise. We will withdraw our fleet if you agree to enter formal negotiations regarding trade agreements and mutual defense treaties. Nothing exploitative, genuine partnerships that benefit both parties.
Chen raised an eyebrow. "That's what we offered you in the first place, 10 years ago." Veshka had the grace to look embarrassed. "Yes, well, perhaps we should have accepted then." "Perhaps you should have." Chen considered for a moment. "I will present your proposal to my government, but I want something in return." "What?" "Ambassador Velkarath, the one who recommended this invasion. I want him reassigned to Earth as your permanent diplomatic envoy." Veshka blinked in confusion. "Why would you want him?" "Because he spent 17 years studying us and completely failed to understand what he was looking at. I think he needs to spend a few more years learning why." Chen allowed herself a slight smile. "Consider it an educational opportunity. For both of us." Ambassador Velkorath arrived on Earth 3 months later. He had been stripped of most of his diplomatic credentials, effectively demoted to a cultural attaché. His career was in ruins, his reputation destroyed. He fully expected to find a hostile population, eager to humiliate him.
Instead, he found Admiral Chen waiting for him at the spaceport.
Ambassador, welcome to Earth.
"I'm no longer an ambassador," he said bitterly.
Not officially, but I think you earned the title, even if you used it poorly. Chen gestured toward a waiting vehicle. I'd like to show you something, if you're willing.
"Do I have a choice?"
Always. That's the point. The vehicle took them to a place called Normandy, on the coast of a landmass the humans called Europe. Velkorath had studied human geography during his years of observation, but nothing had prepared him for what he saw. Row upon row of white markers, stretching to the horizon. Thousands upon thousands of them, each marking a burial place. "These are graves," Chen said quietly. "Soldiers who died in a battle that happened over 400 years ago. One of our species' many wars."
"Why do you preserve them?"
So we don't forget. Chen led him along a path between the markers. This battle was part of a conflict that killed over 70 million people, the worst war in human history up to that point. We call it World War II.
Velkorath calculated 70 million was a significant portion of the global population at that time. How could you continue as a species after such a loss? We almost didn't. We came close to destroying ourselves completely, first in this war, then in others that followed. Chen stopped walking and turned to face him. "Do you know what finally stopped us?"
"Your unification?"
"No, that came later. What stopped us was memory." She gestured at the graves around them. "We built places like this all over our world, monuments to the dead, reminders of what we had done to ourselves. We taught our children about these horrors, not to glorify them, but to ensure they would never be repeated."
"But you maintained your weapons, your military capabilities."
"Yes, because we understood something that you apparently don't." Chen's voice grew hard. "Peace is not the absence of capacity for violence. Peace is the choice not to use that capacity, and it can only remain a choice if the capacity exists." She started walking again, and Velkorath followed. "Your species achieved your current level of power by conquering weaker peoples. You've done it so many times that you've forgotten what it's like to face an equal. When you looked at us, you saw what you expected to see, a soft, peaceful species ripe for exploitation. You never thought to look deeper. We studied you for decades. You studied our public face, the face we chose to show you. But behind it, we maintained everything we needed to defend ourselves. Not because we wanted to use it, but because we knew someday someone would assume our peace was weakness." Chen shook her head. "You're not the first to make that mistake. Historically, there have been many who looked at periods of human peace and assumed we had lost our edge." She stopped at a particular grave and knelt to brush leaves from the marker. "Private James Miller, 19 years old when he died. Probably had no interest in being a soldier. But when his home was threatened, he picked up a rifle and crossed an ocean to fight." She stood. "That's the thing about humans, Ambassador. We don't like war. We genuinely prefer peace. But when pushed, we become something else entirely. And we never forget how." Part 9. The Archive Unveiled. Over the following months, Velkorath was given unprecedented access to human society. He visited schools and universities, attended cultural events, dined with families from every corner of Earth and its colonies. And slowly, he began to see what he had missed. The museums that preserved weapons alongside the stories of their use. The war games played by children that taught basic tactics while emphasizing the costs of conflict.
The stories and entertainments that portrayed soldiers not as heroes, but as ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances. The veterans who spoke at schools, describing not glory, but trauma. It was all there, hiding in plain sight. A civilization that had genuinely embraced peace, but had never lost its awareness of what lay beneath. Then, 6 months after his arrival, Admiral Chen made him an offer.
I'd like to show you the archive.
Vel'Korath had heard rumors about the archive, a secret military facility that had supposedly preserved humanity's martial knowledge through centuries of peace. Most hegemony intelligence analysts had dismissed it as propaganda, a myth designed to make humans appear more dangerous than they actually were.
The reality was far beyond anything he had imagined. Chen led him through underground corridors that seemed to extend forever. They passed training facilities where soldiers drilled in tactics that looked nothing like modern galactic warfare. They passed research laboratories where scientists developed weapons based on principles the hegemony had abandoned millennia ago. They passed simulation chambers running continuous war games against every known species in the galaxy.
We have files on every intelligent species we've encountered, Chen explained. Detailed analyses of their military capabilities, their tactical doctrines, their historical conflicts. We study them all.
You develop strategies to defeat all of them.
We develop strategies to defeat any threat to humanity. It's nothing personal, it's just what we do. Chen paused in front of a particular door. This is the historical section, where we preserve the memory of human warfare. Inside was a vast chamber filled with artifacts. Ancient swords hung beside modern energy weapons. Tattered banners shared space with holographic battle maps. Books, documents, and data crystals contained the accumulated military knowledge of 10,000 years. We preserve everything, Chen said. From the first time a human picked up a rock to strike another human, to the most advanced weapons we've ever developed. We study it, we analyze it, we learn from it.
To what end?
To ensure that if we ever have to fight again, we do it quickly and decisively, with minimum loss of life on both sides. That's the paradox of the archive, Ambassador. We preserve the tools of war specifically so that peace might endure.
Vel'Korath wandered through the collection, his mind reeling. He stopped before a display showing a simple firearm, primitive by galactic standards, a chemical propellant weapon from centuries ago.
This was carried by a soldier in something called the Great War, Chen explained. Over 100 years before our species achieved nuclear weapons, they were fighting in trenches, killing each other with bullets and poison gas. 10 million died in that conflict alone.
And you preserved this weapon?
We preserved all of them, along with the tactics used on both sides, the strategies that succeeded and failed, the innovations that emerged from the chaos. Chen picked up the weapon, handling it with obvious familiarity. This is more than a weapon, Ambassador. It's a teacher. It carries lessons written in blood.
She set it back down gently. That's what you never understood about us. When we say never again, we don't mean we've chosen to be helpless. We mean we've chosen to be so prepared that no one will ever force us to fight. And if they do force us, we've chosen to end it so quickly and decisively that it will never happen again. Part 10. The New Understanding. 1 year after the failed invasion, Vel'Korath stood before the Grand Council. He was there to deliver his new assessment of humanity, a complete reversal of everything he had told them before. The council listened in uncomfortable silence as he described what he had learned.
I was wrong, he said simply. We were all wrong. The humans did not forget war. They internalized it. They turned it into an institution, a practice, a sacred duty passed from generation to generation.
But they genuinely embrace peace, Counselor Morthax protested. Their society is built on cooperation and mutual aid.
Yes, and that's precisely what makes them so dangerous. Vel'Korath projected images from his time on Earth, the memorials, the museums, the training facilities, the hidden arsenals. They chose peace specifically because they understood war so intimately. They know what they're capable of, and they deliberately chose not to exercise that capability. But the capacity never disappeared. It was simply stored.
How extensive are their preparations?
Velkorath hesitated. I was not shown everything, but based on what I observed, I estimate they could have defeated our invasion fleet within hours, possibly minutes. They chose to demonstrate restraint specifically to preserve our ability to retreat without total loss of face.
The council erupted in agitation. Velkorath waited for the noise to subside.
There is more. The humans did not develop these capabilities in response to our threat. They have been maintaining them for 300 years against any possible future threat. Their defense preparations include strategies for dealing with species we haven't even encountered yet.
That's paranoia of the highest order.
No, it's pattern recognition. Humans evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them. They learned very early that survival required constant vigilance. That lesson is encoded in their very psychology. They trust, they cooperate, they build genuine friendships with other species, but they never, ever stop watching for threats.
Councillor Thalmara, who had cast the lone dissenting vote a year ago, spoke up. What do you recommend now, Ambassador?
Velkorath turned to her with something approaching respect. I recommend that we do exactly what they suggested in the first place. Genuine partnership based on mutual benefit and mutual respect. They don't want to be our enemies. They genuinely prefer cooperation. But if we try to exploit them again, they will respond with a level of violence that we are not prepared to handle.
And if we simply leave them alone entirely?
Then we will have lost the opportunity of a lifetime. Velkorath's voice grew intense. You don't understand. The humans aren't just dangerous, they're also brilliant. Their approach to warfare has led them to innovations in every field: logistics, medicine, psychology, engineering. They know things about conflict resolution that we've never considered. They could be invaluable allies if we approach them correctly.
How do we approach them correctly?
As equals, as partners, as friends if they'll have us. Velkorath paused, and with the clear understanding that they will never, ever be our servants.
Part 11. The Partnership.
10 years after the failed invasion, the hegemony of 12 spheres and the United Earth Federation signed the Accord of Mutual Recognition.
It was the first genuine partnership the hegemony had ever entered into, not a master-servant relationship, but a true alliance of equals. The negotiations had been difficult, but the result was transformative.
Earth contributed its unique perspective on conflict resolution, helping to mediate disputes between hegemony species that had festered for millennia. Human military advisors helped reform hegemony defensive strategies, introducing concepts that the insular species had never considered. Human doctors revolutionized hegemony medicine with techniques developed during centuries of battlefield trauma care. In return, the hegemony shared technologies that accelerated human development by decades. New colonies were established, new trade routes opened. The two civilizations grew together, each strengthened by the other's gifts.
But Earth never relaxed its vigilance.
The archive continued to operate, expanding its preparations to include new potential threats. The hidden fleets remained hidden, maintained in perfect readiness. The training programs continued, ensuring that each generation understood what its predecessors had learned.
And the monuments remained. The walls of names, the preserved battlefields, the graves that stretched to the horizon, reminders of what humans were capable of and what they had chosen to leave behind.
Admiral Chen, now retired, sat in a garden in Beijing on the anniversary of the invasion. Velkorath, who had become something like a friend over the years, sat beside her.
"Do you ever regret not using your full capabilities?" he asked. "You could have destroyed our fleet, made an example of us, ensured no one would ever threaten Earth again."
We did ensure that, Chen said. Not through destruction, but through demonstration. The whole galaxy now knows what we're capable of. That's protection enough.
But you held back. Why? Chen was quiet for a moment, watching children play in the distance.
Because that's not who we want to be. We maintain the capability for violence specifically so we don't have to use it. If we had massacred your fleet, we would have become the thing we were trying to protect against. She smiled slightly. There's an ancient human concept called deterrence, the idea that you prevent war by being so prepared for it that no rational opponent would ever attack.
And if you face an irrational opponent, then we respond appropriately, but we always try reason first. Always. Chen turned to look at him. That's the balance we've struck. Capable of incredible violence, but committed to exhausting every other option first. It's not a contradiction. It's a discipline.
Vel'Korath considered this. Your species confuses me, Admiral.
We confuse ourselves sometimes. Chen laughed softly. We're a mass of contradictions. Violent and peaceful. Trusting and paranoid. Generous and selfish. We contain multitudes, as one of our poets once said. And the multitude includes the capacity for war.
It includes everything. Every dark impulse, every light one. We don't deny any of it. We just try to choose which parts we express. She watched the children playing. Those kids will grow up learning about war. They'll study the battles, learn the tactics, understand the costs. And then they'll choose, as every generation has chosen, to pursue peace instead. Not because they can't fight, but because they've seen what fighting really means.
And if someone forces their hand?
Chen's smile faded. Her eyes, for a moment, showed something ancient and cold.
Then they'll remember everything we taught them, and they'll use it.
Part 12. The Test.
25 years after the accord was signed, a new threat emerged.
The Vrathi Collective had conquered 3 sectors of the galaxy through brutal efficiency. They had never encountered Earth, never studied humans, never heard the warnings that now circulated through galactic diplomatic channels. When their expansion brought them to the edge of human space, they sent a simple message: surrender or be destroyed.
Ambassador Vel'Korath, now elderly but still serving as the hegemony's primary liaison to Earth, received the news with a sense of déjà vu.
They're making the same mistake we made, he told his human counterpart, Ambassador Sarah Chen, the daughter of Admiral Chen, who had passed away 5 years earlier.
They haven't studied us. They don't know what they're facing.
Neither did we, and we had 17 years of observation. Vel'Korath shook his head. What will your people do? The same thing we always do. Try to negotiate, explain the situation, give them every chance to reconsider.
And if they don't?
Ambassador Chen's expression could have belonged to her mother. Then we'll remind them why negotiation was the better option. The Vrathi had never seen anything like the human response. They had expected a soft species, a peaceful civilization that would collapse at the first sign of serious threat. What they encountered was a well-oiled machine that had spent 3 centuries preparing for exactly this moment. The humans didn't just defend their territory. They coordinated a response with the hegemony, leveraging alliances that had been built over decades. They implemented strategies that seemed to predict every Vrathi move before it was made. They deployed weapons that the Vrathi sensors couldn't track and couldn't counter. The war, if it could even be called that, lasted 3 weeks. The Vrathi fleet was systematically dismantled, not destroyed. Their soldiers were captured, not killed. Their worlds were blockaded, not bombarded. At every stage, the humans offered terms: cease hostilities, negotiate in good faith, and all would be forgiven. When the Vrathi finally accepted those terms, they did so with a new understanding of the species they had challenged. "How did you prepare for us?" their commander asked during the surrender ceremony. "We never encountered your species before this conflict, yet you seem to know exactly how to defeat us."
Admiral James Okafor, son of the general who had activated the archive during the hegemony crisis, smiled grimly.
We didn't prepare for you specifically. We prepared for any threat that might emerge. We studied every species we encountered, developed strategies based on general principles of warfare, and maintained the flexibility to adapt. He paused. Also, you're not the first aggressive species to assume that our peace meant weakness. We've learned a lot from those encounters.
But why maintain such capabilities if you prefer peace?
Because peace is only possible when it's a choice, not a necessity. If we were incapable of defending ourselves, peace would just mean victimhood. We'd be forced to accept whatever terms our enemies dictated. Okafor's voice grew serious. We maintain our martial capabilities specifically so that when we offer friendship, it means something. We're not being friendly because we have no other option. We're being friendly because we choose to be.
The Vrathi commander processed this. And if we had refused your terms? Then we would have escalated, incrementally, proportionally, until you understood that continuing the conflict was more costly than accepting peace. Okafor shook his head. We don't enjoy war, Commander. We've learned exactly how horrible it is. That's why we work so hard to avoid it. But when avoidance fails, we're prepared to end it as quickly and decisively as possible.
You could have simply destroyed us.
We could have, but then we'd have to live with that, and the galaxy would learn that humans respond to threats with annihilation. That would make future negotiations more difficult, not less. Okafor extended his hand, a human gesture of respect that had been explained to the Vrathi during negotiations. We'd rather have you as partners than as corpses. That's the core of our strategy, Commander. We prefer partnership, but we're ready for anything.
100 years after the failed hegemony invasion, Earth had become one of the great powers of the galaxy.
Not through conquest, not through exploitation, through partnership, innovation, and the quiet understanding that no one with any sense wanted to find out what humans would do if pushed too far.
The archive had grown beyond its original purpose. It now served as a training facility for all species in the Accord, teaching the principles of deterrence and strategic restraint that humanity had developed. Thousands of non-human students walked its halls each year, learning lessons written in blood by species long dead.
The memorials had multiplied too. Alongside the graves of Normandy and the walls of Beijing stood new monuments commemorating conflicts across the galaxy. Human and non-human names stood side by side, honoring all who had died in defense of the peace that now prevailed.
And on the anniversary of the invasion, a ceremony was held.
Representatives of 100 species gathered in Geneva in a hall built specifically for this purpose. At its center stood a simple monument, a soldier's rifle from the Great War, mounted beside an energy weapon from the Vrathi conflict, symbolizing the continuity of humanity's martial tradition.
The keynote speaker was a young human woman named Elena Chen, great-granddaughter of the admiral who had faced down the hegemony fleet a century ago. She stood at the podium, looking out at the gathered representatives, and spoke words that had been passed down through her family for generations.
100 years ago, a fleet came to Earth expecting surrender. They had studied us for decades and concluded that we were soft, peaceful, and weak. They believed that 3 centuries of peace had dulled our edge, that we had forgotten the arts of war that our ancestors had practiced. She paused, letting the silence stretch. They were wrong. We had not forgotten. We had simply chosen not to remember in public. Behind our peaceful facade, we maintained everything we needed to defend ourselves, not because we wanted to fight, but because we understood that the capacity for violence is the foundation on which genuine peace is built. Elena gestured at the monument behind her.
This rifle was carried by a soldier named James Miller. He was 19 years old when he died on a beach in Normandy, fighting to liberate a continent from tyranny. He didn't want to be a soldier. He was a farmer's son from a small town who had never fired a weapon before his training. But when his world was threatened, he picked up a rifle and crossed an ocean to fight.
She picked up the weapon, holding it carefully. Every generation, we tell our children about James Miller, not to glorify war, but to remember what ordinary people are capable of when pushed to extremes. We teach them about the horror and waste of conflict, about the millions who died in wars that could have been prevented. But we also teach them this: when the moment comes, when there is no other choice, humans have always found the strength to fight.
Elena set the weapon down and turned to face the audience directly.
The species gathered here today have learned this lesson. Some of you learned it the hard way, by testing our resolve. Others learned it through partnership, by seeing what lies beneath our peaceful surface. But all of you now understand the core truth about humanity. We prefer peace, but we are always prepared for war.
She smiled, a smile that carried echoes of her great-grandmother's.
That is our gift to the galaxy. Not just our science, our culture, our willingness to cooperate and share, but also our example. The example of a species that chose peace through strength, that maintained its martial traditions specifically so it would never have to use them. A species that never forgot what it was capable of, even when it decided to be something else.
The hall was silent. Then, starting from the hegemony delegation, applause began to spread. It grew until it filled the chamber, a thunderous acknowledgement of everything humanity had achieved.
Elena waited for it to subside. 100 years from now, another Chen may stand in this hall, speaking to another assembly. The threats we face will be different, the challenges unknown, but the principle will remain the same. We will remember. We will prepare. We will hope for peace while being ready for war. Her voice grew soft, but carried to every corner of the hall.
That is what it means to be human. We are creatures of contradiction, peaceful and violent, trusting and suspicious, hopeful and pragmatic. We contain multitudes. And among those multitudes, there will always be the memory of war. Not because we love it, but because we understand that forgetting it would doom us to repeat it.
She stepped back from the podium. They assumed we forgot war. Earth never did. And as long as there are humans in this galaxy, we never will. Epilogue. The Eternal Vigil. Somewhere deep beneath a mountain on Earth, in a facility that had existed for centuries, a changing of the guard took place.
The young officer taking up her post had trained her entire life for this moment. She knew the history, understood the responsibility, accepted the sacred duty that had been passed down through generations.
She walked through the vast chambers of the archive, past weapons that had never been used and strategies that had never been implemented, past simulations running continuously, preparing for threats that might never materialize, past the memorial walls that listed the names of every archivist who had served before her, preserving humanity's martial knowledge so that peace might endure.
At the center of the archive was a simple inscription, the same words that had guided every generation of caretakers.
We remember so that we may never repeat. We prepare so that preparation may never be needed. We preserve the arts of war so that the art of peace may flourish. The young officer stood before those words, understanding their meaning in a way that could only come from years of training and study. Humanity had chosen peace, genuinely, wholeheartedly, irrevocably chosen it. But they had made that choice with open eyes, understanding exactly what they were giving up and what they were preserving against the day it might be needed again. The galaxy had learned not to test that resolve. But humans knew that new threats would always emerge, that peace was never permanent, that the price of safety was eternal vigilance. And so the archive continued. The training programs ran, the weapons were maintained, the strategies were developed and refined. Somewhere out there, a species was probably looking at humanity and assuming that their long peace meant they had grown soft. That species was probably planning how to exploit that perceived weakness. They would learn
as others had learned before them. Earth never forgot.
Earth never would. The officers settled into her post and began her vigil, one more link in a chain that stretched back 300 years and would stretch forward for as long as humans existed.
Peace through strength. Readiness without aggression. The eternal balance that humanity had found, that they maintained, that they would defend against any threat.
The galaxy could rest easy.
Earth was watching.
End.